Sara was supposed to be living the best years of her life. At 20 years old, college should have been about late-night study sessions, new friendships, and discovering who she was meant to become. Instead, she found herself trapped in a nightmare that began with a simple stomachache and evolved into a battle for survival that would test every fiber of her being. Picture this: a young woman running to the bathroom 50 times a day, her body betraying her in the most humiliating ways possible. Adult diapers became her reality as ulcerative colitis ravaged her digestive system with merciless precision. Every meal became an enemy, every social gathering a potential disaster. This wasn't just illness. This was a complete theft of youth, dignity, and hope. But sometimes, in the darkest moments of human suffering, miracles find a way to break through. Sometimes, when all conventional medicine fails, there's a doctor willing to push boundaries, to risk everything, to see the person behind the patient. Dr. Kim, known in medical circles as the miracle doctor, was exactly that kind of physician. With hands faster than lightning and a heart bigger than his reputation, he specialized in cases others deemed impossible. Sara's journey would span 8 grueling years, multiple surgeries, life-threatening infections, and moments when death seemed more merciful than survival. Yet through it all, there was something unbreakable in her spirit, something that would eventually connect with a surgeon who refused to accept defeat. The K-pouch procedure that would ultimately save Sara's life was performed by fewer than a dozen surgeons worldwide. The odds were stacked against her, her body scarred by previous failures, her spirit tested beyond human limits. But in the sterile halls of New York Presbyterian, where hope often hangs by the thinnest of threads, a miracle was about to unfold. This is a story about more than medical procedures and surgical techniques. It's about the profound connection between healer and patient, about the courage it takes to trust when trust has been shattered, and about finding light in the deepest darkness. It's about a young woman who refused to let her 20s be stolen by disease, and a doctor who saw beyond the complexity of her case to the vibrant life waiting to be reclaimed. If you've ever faced a medical challenge that seemed insurmountable, if you've ever wondered whether healing is possible when hope seems lost, then Sara's story will speak directly to your heart. Subscribe to join us on this incredible journey, because sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply knowing you're not alone. The story you're about to hear will change how you think about resilience, about medical miracles, and about the extraordinary things that become possible when human compassion meets surgical excellence. Sara woke up on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday morning in 2009, but her body had other plans. The cramping that had been bothering her for weeks was getting worse, and what started as occasional bathroom trips had become an exhausting marathon of urgency and pain. "Something's really wrong with me," she whispered to her roommate, clutching her stomach as another wave of cramping hit. At 20, Sara was supposed to be worried about exams and dating, not whether she could make it through a single class without multiple bathroom breaks. The symptoms escalated with frightening speed. What began as 10 bathroom visits a day quickly became 20, then 30, then an unthinkable 50 times daily. Sara's life became measured in the distance between bathrooms, her world shrinking to the confines of her dorm room and the nearest restroom. Dr. Kim, reviewing Sara's case years later, would shake his head with the kind of sorrow that comes from seeing too much suffering. "When I read her initial charts," he would tell his residents, "I saw a young woman whose entire existence had been hijacked by her own body. Ulcerative colitis doesn't just attack the colon. It attacks dignity, hope, and the very essence of what it means to live freely." Sara's parents, watching their vibrant daughter disappear before their eyes, felt helpless. Her mother would later recall, "I watched my baby girl, who used to dance around the house and dream about changing the world, become afraid to leave her room. She was wearing adult diapers because her body had become so unpredictable. What mother should have to watch their child go through that?" The diagnosis came like a thunderbolt: ulcerative colitis, a chronic inflammatory bowel disease that would turn Sara's digestive system into a battlefield. The gastroenterologist delivered the news with clinical detachment, explaining how the immune system had turned against her colon, creating ulcers and inflammation that caused the constant bleeding and diarrhea. "It's manageable," the doctor assured her, prescribing medications with names she couldn't pronounce and side effects that sounded almost as scary as the disease itself. But Sara had already learned not to trust easy answers. Her body had taught her that sometimes the most devastating battles are fought in places no one can see. The medications, prednisone and infliximab, brought some relief, but at a terrible cost. As a type 1 diabetic, Sara watched helplessly as the prednisone wreaked havoc on her blood sugar levels. She had to increase her insulin dramatically, and within months, she had gained over 50 pounds. Looking in the mirror became another form of torture. Dr. Kim often tells his students, medicine is not just about treating symptoms. It's about understanding how each treatment affects the whole person. When we give prednisone to save someone's colon, we must consider what it does to their diabetes, their self-image, their mental health. Every decision ripples through their entire existence. The college experience Sara had dreamed about became a distant memory. While her friends were joining clubs and building relationships, Sara was learning to navigate a world where every meal was a gamble and every social situation a potential catastrophe. The isolation was perhaps worse than the physical symptoms. Watching life happen around her while feeling trapped in a body that had become her enemy. As months passed without true remission, Sara began to understand a harsh truth. Sometimes the treatments we hope will save us only buy us time before the real battle begins. By 2012, Sara had made the difficult decision to move to Florida to live with her grandmother while pursuing graduate school. She hoped that a change of scenery and family support might help her manage her condition better. Instead, her symptoms exploded into a crisis that would change everything. "I thought I had experienced the worst of it," Sara would later tell Dr. Kim. "But Florida was where I learned what rock bottom really felt like." The humid climate seemed to aggravate her inflammation, and soon she was bedridden, unable to even attempt the graduate classes she had enrolled in with such hope. Her grandmother, a woman who had survived the Great Depression and raised 6 children, was shocked by the severity of Sara's condition. "I've seen a lot of suffering in my 90 years, she would tell anyone who would listen. But watching my granddaughter waste away, unable to keep food in her body, unable to leave her bed, that broke my heart in ways I didn't know were possible." The local gastroenterologist in Florida took one look at Sara's deteriorating condition and made a decision that would mark the beginning of her surgical journey. "The medications aren't working," he explained to Sara and her grandmother during a particularly difficult consultation. "We need to consider a colectomy, removing the diseased portion of your large intestine." Dr. Kim often reflects on this moment when teaching about inflammatory bowel disease. The decision to move from medical to surgical treatment is never taken lightly, he explains to his residents. For a young woman in her early 20s, the idea of living with an ostomy, a bag attached to the outside of her body to collect waste, represents a fundamental change in how she sees herself and her future. The surgery took place in April 2012, and Sara woke up to a new reality. Where once her abdomen had been smooth, there was now a small opening called a stoma, and attached to it was a clear bag that would collect her body's waste. The ostomy was supposed to give her freedom from the constant bathroom urgency, but it brought its own set of challenges. "The first time I looked at myself in the mirror after surgery," Sara recalls, "I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. I was 23 years old, and I felt like my body had been completely rewritten. I had to learn everything again, how to shower, how to sleep, how to choose clothes that would hide the bag." The ostomy bag required constant attention and created new problems Sara hadn't anticipated. The adhesive that kept the bag attached to her skin caused severe irritation and rashes. Within days of the surgery, her skin around the stoma became raw, bleeding, and infected. What should have been a solution had created another layer of suffering. Sara's mother flew down to Florida to help with her recovery, but what she found alarmed her. "My daughter had traded one problem for another," she remembers. She wasn't running to the bathroom 50 times a day anymore, but now she was dealing with painful skin breakdown, infections around the stoma, and a depression that scared me more than anything she had been through before. Dr. Kim, when he eventually became involved in Sara's care, would recognize this pattern immediately. "Ostomy complications are more common than many patients realize," he explains. "When someone's skin can't tolerate the adhesive products, when infections keep recurring, when the quality of life doesn't improve significantly, we have to consider other options. That's when procedures like the K-pouch become not just possible, but necessary." The physical pain from the skin irritation was constant and intense. Sara found herself applying barrier creams, changing appliances multiple times a day, and still dealing with breakdown and bleeding. Sleep became nearly impossible as the burning sensation never relented. But perhaps more challenging than the physical symptoms was the emotional toll. Sara had undergone major surgery with the hope of reclaiming her life, only to find herself facing new limitations and complications she hadn't expected. The promise of normalcy seemed further away than ever. The weight gain from the prednisone had left Sara carrying over 50 extra pounds, and by 2014, she made the decision to have bariatric surgery. This wasn't vanity. The extra weight was affecting her diabetes management, putting additional strain on her joints, and contributing to a depression that seemed to deepen with each passing month. Dr. Kim often discusses this period of Sara's journey with particular empathy. Patients with chronic illness face compound challenges, he explains to his team. Sara wasn't just dealing with ulcerative colitis and ostomy complications. She was managing type 1 diabetes, obesity from steroid treatment, skin breakdown, and the psychological impact of watching her body change in ways beyond her control. Each problem created new problems. The bariatric surgery was successful in terms of weight loss, but it introduced another variable into Sara's already complex medical situation. Her nutritional needs became even more challenging to manage with both the ostomy and the altered digestive tract from the weight loss surgery. I remember thinking, Sara reflects, that I had become a walking collection of surgical procedures. Every solution seemed to create new problems that needed new solutions. I started to wonder if I would ever feel like myself again, or if the rest of my life would just be managing one complication after another. Her grandmother, watching Sara struggle with the ongoing skin irritation from the ostomy bag, began researching alternatives. Despite her advanced age, she spent hours on the computer, printing out articles about different surgical options and making lists of questions for doctors. I wasn't going to watch my granddaughter suffer if there were other options out there, she said with fierce determination. It was during this research that they first learned about J-pouch surgery, a procedure that would create an internal pouch from part of the small intestine, potentially eliminating the need for an external ostomy bag. The procedure offered hope that Sara could return to a more normal bathroom function and eliminate the skin complications that had plagued her for years. In 2015, Sara found a surgeon at a northeastern hospital who was willing to perform the J-pouch procedure. The operation would be done in stages, first creating the pouch and allowing it to heal, then connecting it and removing the ostomy. For the first time in years, Sara allowed herself to hope that normal life might be possible. The surgeon seemed confident, Sara remembers. He explained how the J-pouch would work, how I'd be able to go to the bathroom more normally, how I wouldn't need the external bag anymore. After everything I'd been through, it sounded like a miracle. Her family rallied around the decision. Her mother took time off work to be with Sara for the surgery, and her grandmother insisted on coming north to provide support during recovery. They had been through so much together, and this felt like it might finally be the solution they had all been praying for. The first stage of the surgery in June 2015 seemed to go well initially. Sara woke up with renewed optimism, believing she was finally on the path to reclaiming her life. The surgical team assured her that everything had gone according to plan, and she began the healing process with more hope than she had felt in years. But in Sara's medical journey, hope had become a fragile thing, easily shattered by unexpected complications. What none of them could have predicted was that brewing silently in Sara's abdomen was an infection that would nearly cost her life and transform her story from one of gradual recovery into a fight for survival that would require intervention from one of the world's most skilled surgeons. The stage was being set for Sara to meet Dr. Kim, though neither of them knew it yet. What happened next would haunt Sara's dreams for years to come. 3 weeks after her J-pouch surgery, as she was beginning to feel optimistic about her recovery, a popped suture created a catastrophic situation that no one had anticipated. The pain hit me like lightning, Sara recalls. One moment I was walking around my hospital room, feeling grateful that the surgery was behind me, and the next moment I was doubled over in agony that was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The popped suture had allowed stool to leak from her intestine directly into her bloodstream, a medical emergency that sent toxins racing through her entire system. Within hours, Sara's body was fighting a battle it was ill-equipped to win. The infection that developed was necrotizing fasciitis, known in medical circles as the flesh-eating bacteria. Dr. Kim, when he later reviewed Sara's medical records from this period, was struck by the severity of her condition. Necrotizing fasciitis is one of the most aggressive infections we encounter, he explains to his residents. It literally destroys healthy tissue at an alarming rate. When it affects the genital area, as it did in Sara's case, the tissue damage can be extensive and the psychological impact devastating. The pain was so intense that Sara's medical team made the decision to place her in a medically induced coma. For 2 full weeks, while her family kept vigil at her bedside, surgeons worked desperately to save her life. She underwent 6 separate surgeries during those 14 days, with doctors removing infected tissue and fighting to stay ahead of the spreading bacteria. "I've never felt so helpless," Sara's mother remembers. "My daughter was lying there unconscious while machines kept her alive, and the doctors were telling us they weren't sure if she was going to make it. Every day brought another surgery, another setback, another reason to fear we might lose her." Her grandmother, despite her age, refused to leave the hospital. She set up camp in the family waiting area, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs and surviving on vending machine food. "I kept thinking about all the things Sara still wanted to do with her life," she said. "She wanted to help people, to make a difference in the world. I wasn't going to let her give up on those dreams." The medical team fighting to save Sara was led by surgeons who had seen their share of complex cases, but even they were challenged by the aggressive nature of her infection. Each surgery revealed more damaged tissue that had to be removed, and the extent of the reconstruction she would eventually need became more apparent with each procedure. Dr. Kim often uses Sara's case as a teaching example for his residents about the cascade effect of medical complications. One small surgical failure led to a life-threatening emergency that required multiple surgeries and left her with tissue damage that would affect her quality of life for years. This is why we must consider not just the immediate surgical goal, but all the potential complications and have plans for managing them. When Sara finally woke up from the medically induced coma in late July 2015, the world had changed completely. The tissue damage around her genital area was extensive, her body was weak from the prolonged fight against infection, and the J-pouch that was supposed to solve her problems had become the source of a trauma that nearly killed her. "I remember looking down at my body and not recognizing it," Sara says quietly. The person who had gone to sleep after what was supposed to be a routine surgery had woken up as someone completely different. "I had scars I didn't remember getting, tissue damage that would require more surgeries, and a fear that I might never feel safe in my own skin again." But Sara was alive, and sometimes that's where miracles begin, with the simple, powerful fact of survival against impossible odds. Sara left the hospital at the end of July 2015, but her ordeal was far from over. The infection had been conquered, but the damage it left behind would require months of additional care. She found herself in and out of the hospital repeatedly as complications arose, and the healing process proved more challenging than anyone had anticipated. "What was supposed to be 1 month off work turned into 8 months, Sara explains. Twice the infection tried to come back, and each time meant more surgery, more tissue removal, more setbacks. I started to wonder if my body would ever stop betraying me." Her mother had become her full-time caregiver, learning to manage wound care, medications, and the complex logistics of Sara's medical needs. "I watched my daughter's spirit getting crushed a little more with each setback," she remembers. "She had been through so much, fought so hard, and it seemed like every step forward was followed by 2 steps back." The psychological toll was perhaps even harder to bear than the physical challenges. Sara had trusted the medical system with her life and her future, only to end up sicker and more damaged than when she started. The depression that had been manageable before became overwhelming after the trauma of the life-threatening infection. "I started to believe that I was cursed," Sara admits. "That maybe some people just aren't meant to be healthy, aren't meant to live normal lives. I had tried everything, medications, ostomy surgery, J-pouch surgery, and somehow I ended up worse than where I started." It was Sara's mother who refused to accept defeat. While Sara was struggling with depression and the trauma of her near-death experience, her mother was researching, making phone calls, and seeking opinions from specialists across the country. She knew that somewhere there had to be a doctor who could help her daughter. The referral to Dr. Kim came through a physician who had heard about Sara's complicated case. "We had heard that this is the hospital that fixes you when no one else can," Sara's mother recalls. Dr. Kim had a reputation for taking on the impossible cases, for seeing solutions where other doctors saw only problems. Dr. Kim specializes in procedures that most surgeons have never even heard of. The K-pouch surgery that Sara would eventually need was performed by fewer than a dozen surgeons worldwide. It's a complex procedure that creates an internal pouch with a valve system, allowing patients to empty the pouch through a small tube inserted through a tiny opening in the abdomen. When I first met Sara and reviewed her case, Dr. Kim reflects, I saw a young woman who had been through medical trauma that would have broken many people. But I also saw someone with an incredible will to live, someone who deserved a chance at the life she had been fighting so hard to reclaim. The consultation with Dr. Kim was unlike anything Sara had experienced in her medical journey. Instead of focusing only on her disease and complications, he talked to her about her dreams, her goals, her vision for her future. He asked what kind of life she wanted to live, what activities were important to her, what would make her feel whole again. Dr. Kim didn't just see me as a collection of surgical challenges, Sara remembers. He saw me as a person who happened to need a very complex medical solution. He talked to me like I was someone worth saving, someone whose life had value beyond just managing disease. For the first time in years, Sara began to feel something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Not the desperate hope that comes from running out of options, but the steady, grounded hope that comes from meeting someone who truly understands both the technical challenges and the human cost of chronic illness. The K-pouch procedure would be Sara's last chance at reclaiming normal bodily function, but it would also be the most complex surgery she had ever faced. Dr. Kim knew that Sara's case would require not just surgical skill, but careful planning and a staged approach that would give her body the best chance to heal properly. The K-pouch procedure itself was incredibly complex, but Sara's previous surgeries and tissue damage made it even more challenging. The K-pouch is essentially creating a new internal reservoir for waste, Dr. Kim explains to his residents when teaching about the procedure. We use part of the small intestine to create a pouch with a one-way valve system. The patient then uses a soft catheter to empty the pouch several times a day through a small opening in the abdomen. What made Sara's case particularly challenging was the extensive scar tissue from her previous surgeries and the tissue damage from the necrotizing fasciitis. Dr. Kim would have to work around areas of compromised tissue while creating a functional and reliable internal system. The first stage of the K-pouch surgery took place in December 2015. Dr. Kim spent hours carefully dissecting through scar tissue, creating the internal pouch, and establishing the valve system that would allow Sara to control when and how she emptied her bowel waste. The precision required was extraordinary. Every suture had to be perfect, every connection secure. During those hours in surgery, Dr. Kim recalls, I was thinking not just about the technical aspects of the procedure, but about Sara as a person. This young woman had been through trauma that would have broken most people. She deserved surgical work that would give her back not just function, but dignity and freedom. Sara's mother spent those long hours in the waiting room, alternating between prayer and pacing. After everything they had been through, after Sara had nearly died from complications from her previous surgery, the stakes felt impossibly high. Success would mean Sara could finally live normally. Failure could mean losing her daughter forever. When Dr. Kim emerged from the operating room after the first stage, his usual calm confidence was tinged with cautious optimism. The surgery went well, he told Sara's family, but now we wait and see how her body responds. Given her previous complications, we need to be patient and let healing happen at its own pace. The healing process was closely monitored. Every day, Dr. Kim's team checked Sara's surgical sites, monitored for signs of infection, and assessed how well her body was adapting to the new internal system. The months between the first and second stage surgeries were filled with careful observation and gradual improvement. For the first time in years, I wasn't focused on just surviving each day, Sara reflects. I was actually looking forward to what came next. Dr. Kim had given me something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to believe that normal life was possible. The second stage of the surgery took place the following summer, 6 months after the first procedure. This surgery would complete the K-pouch system and, if successful, give Sara the freedom from external ostomy bags that she had been seeking for years. Dr. Kim's skill with the K-pouch procedure was evident in every detail. The internal pouch he created was perfectly sized for Sara's body. The valve system worked exactly as intended, and the small opening in her abdomen was positioned for optimal access and discretion. But Sara's surgical team included more than just Dr. Kim. Dr. Thomas Imahirarobo, a plastic surgeon, worked to rebuild tissue around Sara's torso that had been affected by her previous surgeries and complications. The reconstruction work was crucial not just for function, but for helping Sara feel comfortable in her own body again. The collaboration between Dr. Kim and Dr. Imahirarobo was incredible to watch, Sara remembers. They weren't just fixing medical problems, they were restoring my sense of myself as a whole person. The wound care team that worked with Sara considered her one of the most challenging cases of their careers, but they were determined to see her through to complete healing. By fall 2016, something remarkable had happened. Sara was finally, truly healing. The K-pouch was functioning perfectly, the reconstructed tissue was healthy and strong, and for the first time since her illness began, Sara could imagine a future that wasn't dominated by medical crises and surgical procedures. The first time I went a whole week without thinking about my digestive system, Sara laughs. I almost couldn't believe it. For so many years, every decision, what to eat, where to go, what to wear, was influenced by my medical condition. Suddenly, I could just live. Learning to use the K-pouch system required some adjustment. Sara had to master the technique of emptying the internal pouch using a soft plastic catheter twice daily through the small opening in her abdomen. But compared to the constant urgency of active ulcerative colitis or the skin irritation problems with the ostomy, the K-pouch felt like freedom. Dr. Kim monitored Sara's progress closely during her recovery, but his confidence in the surgical outcome was evident. Sara's body had finally been given a solution it could work with, he explains. The K-pouch eliminated the external bag that was causing skin problems, provided reliable containment of waste, and gave her control over her bodily functions in a way she hadn't experienced since her illness began. Sara's return to work after 8 months of medical leave felt like a victory celebration. Her colleagues, who had watched her struggle through years of illness and complications, were amazed by the transformation. The confident, energetic person they had known before ulcerative colitis had changed her life was finally returning. I had to adjust my diet, Sara explains about her new normal. Fibrous foods that might not fit through the K-pouch tube became off-limits, so I had to give up some vegetables I loved and learn to puree others. But these felt like small compromises compared to what I had been through. The dietary restrictions meant Sara couldn't eat corn, nuts, seeds, or vegetables with skins like tomatoes and peas. She had to be careful about portion sizes and chew her food thoroughly. But after years of fearing every meal might trigger symptoms, having predictable dietary guidelines felt manageable. Dr. Kim often reflects on Sara's case when discussing patient outcomes with his colleagues. Technical surgical success is important, he says, but the real measure of success is whether we've given someone back their life. Sara went from being a young woman trapped by her body's unpredictability to someone who could make plans, pursue her career, and dream about the future again. Perhaps most remarkably, Sara's experience had given her a deep empathy for others facing medical challenges. She had chosen a career working with mentally ill homeless individuals, people who, like her, had faced circumstances that tested their resilience and required comprehensive support to rebuild their lives. The scars on Sara's abdomen tell the story of her medical journey, but they no longer define her daily experience. The small opening where she accesses her K-pouch is barely noticeable, hidden easily under clothing and far less intrusive than the ostomy bag had been. Everything I've been through and the way things turned out, I'm happier than I've ever been, Sara says with a smile that reflects years of hard-won wisdom and gratitude. Today, Sara Musikoff lives the life she fought so hard to reclaim. At work, helping mentally ill homeless individuals navigate complex social services, she brings a unique understanding of what it means to face seemingly impossible challenges and find a way through them. I am 1000% sure I wouldn't have made it if I didn't get my care at New York Presbyterian, Sara concludes when reflecting on her journey. Dr. Kim and Dr. Imahirarobo didn't just perform surgeries. They saw me as a person worth saving and were willing to take on a case that other doctors had given up on. The message of Sara's story resonates far beyond the medical details of her treatment. It speaks to the power of refusing to accept defeat, the importance of finding healthcare providers who see patients as whole human beings, and the incredible things that become possible when cutting-edge medical skill meets unwavering compassion. For anyone facing a medical challenge that seems insurmountable, Sara's journey offers proof that sometimes the most complex problems require the most innovative solutions, and that healing is possible even when hope seems lost. Her 20s weren't stolen by disease after all. They were transformed by it into something deeper, more purposeful, and ultimately more fulfilling than she had ever imagined possible. If you're fighting your own battle with chronic illness, remember Sarah's story. Remember that somewhere there might be a Dr. Kim who sees solutions where others see only problems. Don't give up on the life you deserve to live. Sometimes miracles come disguised as the most complex surgical procedures, performed by doctors who refuse to accept the impossible.